Hi, hello, good morning, welcome back to my channel, or welcome if you're new here. My name is Luca. It is a busy household this morning, so if you can hear any noise in the background, I'm sorry, please ignore it. Today's video is going to be a summer reading wrap-up of all the books that I read this summer, excluding all of the Agatha Christie books that I read, because I'm going to be doing a whole video solely focused on the topic. So yeah, I hope you're looking forward to it. I'm going to jump right into it. I have a pumpkin spice coffee. You can get the big bottles of the syrup on Amazon. Not sponsored, but you can find it there. I hope you have one. Let's jump right in. I might also include a very quick puppy update at the end of this video when I finished filming it, for the people who want to see Mabel. She has grown a lot. She's very, very big. I have my notes down here so you can see me reading from this area. It's because I've written down all my notes. So the first book was Intervered Sky by Fonda Lee. This is an epic fantasy tale inspired by Persian and Arabian folklore, featuring two beasts from Middle Eastern mythology, the manticore and the roc. Esther's family is torn apart when a manticore murders her mother and brother. It becomes her life's mission to hunt and kill manticores by becoming a professional roc trainer. The job of a Ruka is incredibly dangerous. Only 1 in 5 apprentices are able to complete training without getting attacked or killed. I loved this book so much so that I feel like I need more. I feel like there was so much more to offer and explore, but that in itself is still a compliment. If I wanted more, it was because it was so good. It is still packed with emotion. It has plenty of compelling, interesting, well-developed characters, and I really particularly enjoyed the focus on like the human-animal bond. It just leaves you feeling crushed in the end. The book I read after that, ooh, blooming heck, what's happened here? Hang on, grandma's trying to use technology. The next one is In the Lives of Puppets by TJ Klune, which I gave 2 stars to, which was incredibly disappointing because I've loved his other books and I didn't particularly love this one, clearly. This is basically a retelling of Pinocchio, but with robots, and it kind of takes inspiration from The Wizard of Oz. It's essentially about a boy, his father, and his robots who all go on an adventure. But TJ Klune tried to make it more, he tried to make it about what it means to be human. Unfortunately, it didn't really work for me. The emotional beats of this story really fell flat for me, and TJ Klune's trademark sentimentality feels forced and empty to me. The humour brought a few sparks of much needed levity to the story, but the jokes felt quite repetitive, and because the robots are incredibly innocent, the jokes just felt really kind of cheesy and tedious, and it felt like a kid's story. And so it was just a miss for me. I feel like the romance didn't make any sense either. Oh. After that, I read The Last Housewife by Ashley Winstead. I still have nightmares about this book. This one was a 1 star. And if you liked this book, I apologize because I'm gonna be really mean about it. And also, what is wrong with you? Buckle your seatbelts, because I did not like this book, and I'm gonna be a little bit mean about it, so I'm very sorry if you did enjoy this book, but if you did enjoy this book, seriously seek some help, because I feel like I need someone to invent a time machine to to erase memories so that I can completely forget I ever read this book. That's how bad it was. In short, I don't understand who in their right mind is giving this 5 stars. We must be reading different books because y'all are wild. Because this is not it. It is objectively bad and traumatizing in all the wrong ways. This is gonna be mean, but I genuinely can't understand that intelligent people are reading this and liking it. Basically, it's about Shay, who's incredibly stupid. She decides to leave her whole life behind in order to jet off to New York and partner up with her weird podcast friend and figure out if her college bestie really unalived herself or if she was murdered. Trigger warnings galore for this one. Seriously read through the list and take every single one of them very, very seriously. Consider them very, very hard before you go into this book, and then don't go into this book because It's not worth it. It's not, please. This had a total absence of logic and appalling amounts of stupidity. There's some weird ass glorification in this that made me incredibly uncomfortable, all whilst the author made the cringiest attempts at good writing, such as, and I wrote down one of my favourites, up close, the house was somehow larger than how it looked from the road. That's interesting, that, isn't it? Your proofreader let you keep that. And then apart from the bad writing, I mean, I have a lot of books that I need to go through, so I'm not going to go through every single argument for why this is an awful, awful book. Just know that there are many. There we go. I'm gonna save you some time. Why am I pointing to me? I'm gonna save you some time. I'm gonna save me some time. Don't read this book, it was awful. Let's move on to more positive things. The next book I read was The Adventures of Mina al-Serafi by Shannon Chakraborty. Mina al-Serafi, why am I saying it with an accent? Mina al-Serafi, who used to be one of the most notorious pirates in the Indian Ocean, and when we meet her, she has retired to a peaceful life with her daughter and her mum until this elderly wealthy lady finds her and offers her a job she cannot refuse. I'm sorry, I'm really struggling to talk today. So, she's forced out of retirement and she sets off to find all of her old crewmen, and they all set off on an adventure together. If you love pirates, if you love found family vibes, if you like having an already older female character who is well written, and you like big mythological creatures, I think this is because I haven't had any of my coffee yet, then you will absolutely love this. I personally preferred the first half of the book because I feel like when she seeks out all of her old friends, that was the most fun for me, and the tone of the first half was excellent. The second half takes an almost surreal turn. It just felt quite absurd and a little bit ridiculous. The stakes, which were already like impossibly high, kept getting piled on with even higher impossible stakes, and it was too much. The passage where she's on the island, if you've read this book, you know, I felt like I was having a fever dream for that whole portion, and I kind of just pretended that never happened because it got a little bit too much, but I kind of forgive the author for it because I loved the first half so much, and I really, really loved the characters. So even though it wasn't without fault, I still had such a good time with it, and I'm really, really looking forward to continuing. I think this is going to be a trilogy, and I will definitely be reading the second book, and I'm like looking forward to when it comes out. So that was my take on that one. After that, I read Happy Place by Emily Henry. Harriet and Wynne broke up 6 months ago and still haven't told their best friends, which is how they find themselves sharing the largest bedroom at the main cottage that has been their friend group's yearly getaway for the last decade. The cottage is for sale. This is their last week all together in this place, and they can't stand to break their friends' hearts, so they lie through their teeth and plan on telling everyone the truth once the week is up. If you like the fake dating trope, forced proximity, second chance romances, what else? And heaps of yearning, then you're gonna absolutely love this. I had fun with it. It also really reminds me of when I was in Loch Islet and it was summertime, we had beautiful weather, and I remember reading this, having fun with it, and then I recommended it to my friend because I had so much fun with it and she loved it, and we've talked about it together loads. So it wasn't, I can't remember, I don't think I gave it 5 stars, I think I gave it 4 stars. I loved that it wasn't just a romance and that it did have quite a big focus on friendship, and also Emily Henry obviously is an incredibly popular author because she has done so many really good romances, and I think that she often takes kind of maybe overdone tropes, but she does them really, really well. And often she has quite mature characters, and there's not, this is actually a bad example, I was going to say there's not often the trope of miscommunication. In this case there is miscommunication, but I didn't mind it. It felt like it was explained. I believed it and it didn't bother me. So Really enjoyed this one, and I would highly recommend. The one I read after that was Athena's Child by Hannah M. Lynn. I can't remember this one, so I'm gonna have to really focus on my notes. Super short retelling of Medusa. The writing was good, but the storytelling was very simple, and I felt like the author didn't really try to do anything different with this book. It was okay, but I've read better retellings. Medusa didn't get much time to shine, as we also get Perseus's, actually that's quite easy to say. Perspective. Character development was lacking, and you don't get time to really connect to any of the characters. So I couldn't remember that one, which is why I had to read from my notes. I do remember that I listened to it as an audiobook, and it was very quick. So if you're doing chores and you don't have anything to listen to, you could give this one a go. It's not one of the best retellings that I've ever read. There are a few, I feel like I've read a few now, Medusa retellings. Especially, obviously, probably the most popular one would be the one by Natalie Haynes. So if you do want to read a Medusa retelling, I would check hers out because it was better than this one. And yeah, and I thought it was weird to kind of make both Perseus and Medusa victims of gods. Bits of it are coming back to me now. After that, I read The Only Survivors by Megan Miranda, which I gave 3 stars, and I feel like I always give her book 3 stars. This is a thriller following a cast of former classmates dealing with survivor's guilt and harboring secrets 10 years after a tragic accident. When one of them goes missing, fear and suspicion falls on the initial tragedy. In this one, we follow Cassidy's perspective whilst having alternating chapters from the other survivors at the time of the tragedy. I personally never love any of Megan Miranda's books. This one I think is definitely one of her better ones. However, I never really loved them. They're always kind of average or below average, and I usually only ever reach for them as audiobooks when I don't have anything else on the go, or I really need an audiobook, but none of the ones that I want to read are available, or I'm just not interested in any others. Then I will probably pick up one of her books. They're very easy to go through. I know that I can finish them very quickly and they'll pass the time. I think my issue is that the author's books follow a very similar pattern, and the way she sets up certain plot points makes it really obvious that a twist is going to be linked to them, which in turn makes her books very predictable, especially as someone who has read a lot of thrillers. That being said, my opinion does seem to go a little bit against the grain for this one, so I think maybe if you're someone who hasn't read that many thrillers and you really like a slow burn and you enjoy atmospheric settings, then you might really enjoy this one and you should give it a go. You might disagree with my opinion. Next one I read was Carrie, Soto is Back by Taylor Jenkins Reid. Let me take a sip of my coffee before I get into this one. Carrie Soto was the best, but when a younger tennis player matches her all-time slam record, 37-year-old Carrie plans a comeback. But can it be done? Reid really pulls you into the mind of Carrie Soto, a professional tennis player who has lived and breathed tennis her whole life, and she absolutely has to be the best. The fact that she's an unlikable sports personality just makes you kind of warm to her even more. It's a gripping story about ambition verging on obsession. It's about sexism, what it is to be a woman in sports, the double standards for male and female players, the trivializing of her achievements. It's about the love between a father and his daughter. It's about the importance that is put on the likability of a woman in sports rather than her performance at the game. And I loved every second. My heart was in my mouth. Tears were shed, and I will forever want to read more from this author. If you don't like tennis, I personally didn't have that much of a problem with it. I have watched tennis growing up and I like watching Wimbledon, but I'm not like an avid tennis fan, and I don't think it was a problem. I think during this book you will become an avid tennis fan. Okay, so the next one I read was Yellowface by R.F. Kuang. I listened to the audiobook for this one, by the way, which was very good. Athena Liu and June Hayward are 2 authors in the publishing industry with very different levels of success. Despite this, they have an unlikely and a very unhealthy friendship. In a very absurd turn of events, Athena chokes to death on a piece of pancake while spending the evening at her apartment with June. The latter chooses to steal one of her manuscripts and passes it off as her own, hence the book's title. The story is gripping descent into the chaotic world of publishing. I know that this received a lot of criticism when it initially came out, and I feel like a lot of people are quite divided over it. The reviews are very mitigated. I remember that I hated the last 20% of the book, and I pretend that it doesn't exist because it just ruins it. And I would even just skip it if you are going to read it. But I think it was really interesting to have the publishing industry laid bare, to have a comment on the rise of book communities, the toxicity of social media, the role that that plays for authors, and also, of course, what is at the heart of the book, which is racism and social justice. I think that she covers a lot of ground in this one, and I don't think that that's necessarily a good thing. I think that she maybe tried to do a little bit too much, and if she had just focused on one topic instead of trying to do everything, it would have made this more of an effective book. It was a weird one because you don't really root for the main character because obviously what she did was terrible, but it's still very interesting to kind of have like the perspective of someone who is very, very clearly not the hero. It was almost like watching a car crash, you just can't look away. It was dark, it was absurd, it was sometimes quite funny because of the absurdity, but I think that the author clearly projected a lot into the story and vented some of her own like personal grievances, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, but in this case I feel like it really took away from the bigger picture. In any case though, it seems to have really sparked conversation amongst the people who are reviewing it and who have read it. It's one of those ones where you're just gonna have to read it yourself to decide what you think and form your own opinion. The next one I read was Highly Suspicious and Unfairly Cute by Talia Hibbert, which is going to be a much lighter note than the last one. This was a highly anticipated release for people who really loved the Brown Sisters trilogy. However, I didn't realise going into this that it was going to be a YA romance, which isn't always a bad thing, just personally usually isn't my cup of tea. So this is a YA romance that follows two teenagers, Celine and Brad. He's a star football player and she's a TikTok influencer. They used to be friends, but now they hate each other. Or do they? Things that I liked about this book. Number one, Bradley. He was a very sweet character. Number two, one of the main reasons I think Talia Hibbert is so popular is because of her inclusivity and her representation. I really enjoyed that in this book, although I'm not the right person to tell you whether she handled OCD well or not. I really liked the Scottish setting and there were some sweet moments, and I quite liked the family members of both characters. Things I didn't like. I didn't like the dual POV. Although I think it can sometimes work, I think in this case it really just sucked out all of the build up and the yearning, because it erases that element of wondering what the other person is thinking and wondering why the other person acted that way and wondering does the other person feel the same. And obviously, like, it's a romance, you know they're gonna get together in the end, but it just took that whole thing away and made it a little bit dull. The other thing that I personally didn't like is that Celine is on TikTok, which firstly, nothing against TikTok users, but it just reminds me of the outside world and it kind of prevents the aspect of escapism for me, so I just don't really like that little reminder. But not only that, it also brought nothing to the story. It was kind of just like this little quirk for Celine to have, and it didn't work for me. It just brought absolutely nothing for the story. And then the other issue was that I didn't like the plot that much. I really didn't like Celine. I really didn't like her character. I thought she was unnecessarily mean. The kind of enemies to lovers part felt very one-sided. Bradley didn't seem to hate her as much as she hated him, and I don't really understand why she hated him that much. She wasn't a very likable character, but maybe I'm just reading her wrong. The writing also didn't really work for me, so I don't know if maybe I've outgrown Talia Hibbert or if it's because it's slightly more geared to a YA audience. I don't know. Yeah, unfortunately, overall, it didn't really work for me. Okay, two more to go. The first one is The City of Brass by S.A. Chakraborty. I read this because I loved The Adventures of a Mina Serafi so much. Like, I wanted more of her writing, so I wanted to read more by her. And this, spoiler alert, was a huge disappointment, and I'm going to tell you why. Nari is a 20-year-old thief and con artist in the 18th century occupied Cairo. Gifted with some magical ability to discern maladies and how to treat them, she is asked to come and treat a 12-year-old girl who is seemingly possessed. Whilst trying a spell, Nari accidentally summons a jinn, parentheses, do you say jinn or do you say genie? I don't know if I'm saying that right. I'm going to say jinn, but it could be genie. Nari accidentally summons a genie who whisks her away to some world very unlike her own in order to save her from the evil spirit and his army of dead minions. I wrote that summary and I'm still confused, and I've read the book and I'm also still confused. I don't know if that helps you or not. This story is so dense and it is so hard to read. I was confused for about, I don't know, I can't remember how long the book is. I think it's like 500 pages and I feel like I was confused for about 300 of them. The world building is so complex that it overshadows everything else. It's so complicated, and I was confusion, and I remember having to Google what was happening. Like, I had to Google the family lines, and I had to Google the different characters, and I had to Google why certain parties hated each other, because I couldn't. I felt this book made me feel stupid. Maybe I am because I can't talk. But it made me feel so stupid. I couldn't understand what was going on. I didn't know what was happening, when it was happening, why it was happening. I didn't understand. I was so confused. There's a lot of info dumping about the world and the politics and Arabian mythology. And a huge chunk of the first half is just about Nari and this jinn, and this isn't a spoiler, having their little flirty romance in the desert, and it was so boring. But okay, before I get into all of the reasons I didn't like this book, I do want to touch upon why I tried so hard to read it and like it, because there were positives. Alizaid, he was literally the most interesting character. Protect him at all costs. I loved him. I was so excited to read a Muslim Middle Eastern fantasy, which is probably the biggest reason why I kept trying to read it and push through. I also really liked some of the mythology. I really liked the ghouls and the Marids, and you know, that there are genies, even though I didn't like the genie. It's kind of a half and half, because it's positive but negative, because I loved the ending, but it was also the most exciting part of the book. So you win some, you lose some. And there is another thing that I enjoyed, but it's a bit spoilery, but there are two characters that I am shipping so hard, and I need them to be together. And honestly, if I do continue the series, they're gonna probably be one of the biggest reasons why. I need them to get together. I need it to happen. I've been positive. Now, let me go into the negative, although I've already talked about how confusing this freaking book was and how that really got on my nerves. This isn't really a spoiler because it happens very early on, but the romance between Nari and Dara, I don't get it. I don't get it. I hate that romance. I hate those two characters. But to me, Dara is such a red flag, and Nari is also a red flag, because who goes around kissing murderous 1,000-year-old demons after 2 seconds? Okay. I don't understand why she was attracted to him other than he was good looking. He's literally a weird, overprotective alpha hole who killed millions. And he's so unlikable. I feel like you're supposed to root for them, kind of like you're kind of supposed to enjoy the romance. I don't understand why I would enjoy that romance. Also, the other thing I really don't like about Dara is he's so arrogant, and he's always trying to start-ish with all the other characters. He's always trying to provoke them and start beef, and it's just like, just go have some green tea, do some yoga, chill. And then Nari, I just found her annoying, which isn't the best argument, but it's sufficient in my mind. And also, she likes the dead demon dude. So I feel like that's a good enough reason. She's standoffish, she has a bad attitude. I know that you're kind of supposed to feel sorry for her because she's been whisked away to this world that she doesn't know, and she's been put into this position that's like really alien to her, but I couldn't stand with any of her actions. Anytime she did something, I was like, and both of these characters are so cringy. I'm very upset. I need to, it's almost autumn. I had to take a break about 65% of the way through this book because it required so much brain power for me to understand. Again, maybe I'm stupid, but I really had to use my big brain for this book and I got tired. I just got tired and I had to take a break and I left it for about a week. And then I came back to it because I had reached 65% and I felt like I needed to finish it. So I did. The ending did go faster. I don't know if that was because of the break or because it improved, but that's what happened. So basically those were my thoughts about it. Essentially just love-hatred towards two characters. But yeah, I felt incredibly disappointed after reading The Adventures of Mina Serafi, and also because so many people recommend this book and talk about how great the ending is and how it's just like such a good fantasy. And I just felt so disappointed that I didn't have as good a time as everyone else seems to be having. I might continue the series because now that I understand the politics somewhat, maybe it'll be easier, but I'm not in a rush. Right, and to finish off, the last one that I read, finally, you're probably like, yes, we can get rid of her. The last one I read was The Kind Worth Saving by Peter Swanson, which is the sequel to The Kind Worth Killing, which everybody loved that book. It came out in 2015, I think. I might be wrong. Was it 2015? I think it was. And everybody raved about this book and absolutely loved it. I've read it twice now, and I have to say the first time was definitely better than the second, which makes sense because obviously I knew all the twists. But the second time reading it, I was like, I kind of understood the people who didn't get it because I was like, maybe it isn't as good as I remember it. But it was still very, very good the first time I read it. And so I was looking forward to the sequel. Very apprehensive though, because I didn't really feel that it was needed. I quite liked it being a standalone. And I was worried that the author wouldn't be able to live up to the first book. I feel okay about it. So, Henry Kimball, after his previous run-in with Lily Kintner, has had a change in career and now works as a private detective. But when he starts to follow a possibly adulterous husband, the trail seems to lead back to the woman who hired him. This is an engaging, very fast-paced thriller. It was really fun to return to some of the characters from the first book because you already know them, so it was fun to see them again. Although, focus... Abracadabra. Okay. Although I would have been much happier if it just focused on Lily Kintner because I feel like Henry Kimball is he's a bit of a creep, if I'm honest. I don't really like him. The audiobook was really, really good and the read was entertaining enough. However, I do feel that it wasn't at all suspenseful or twisty because you get literally every single character's POV. And so you're kind of just told things, wait, what? You're kind of just told things as they're happening. So that took out any suspense, any thrill. So it was just okay. I didn't have a bad time with it. I think if you want to listen to the audiobook whilst you're doing your cleaning and stuff, it's a good one for that. There you have it. I struggled through this video. I don't know why I can't talk. Maybe it's because it's kind of early in the morning and I feel the pressure to get this done because I need to film it and edit it today so that it can come out tomorrow. But there you go, those were all of the books that I read this summer, excluding Agatha Christie books. I should be filming that video in October, so you can look out for that. I hope that you had a good time here with me today, and I would love to hear what you've been reading. Talk about it in the comments. Loads of people watched my last video, so I feel like there are a few new faces. Hello, welcome. And I think I will now just quickly go and insert a very quick video of Mabel because I also had so many people who subscribed to my channel after we got our Newfoundland puppy. So I will quickly go and film her to show you how much bigger she is now. Bye!
Here she is. Mabel. Hello. Mabel. Hi. Good girl.
Oh. Sit. Yeah. Anyway, that's my very quick Mabel update. There she is. There she is. She's 10 months old now. And I will do another video where you can see her properly.